Hello, welcome back to the third part of the sapling tree building tutorial explanation job 8. And we're on the third part, obviously, so we're going to be looking at splitting today. This is just one of my lovely giant redwoods. He's a lovely looking fella, big old bugger. Okay, so let's get started by heading over to viewport and then bringing up your sapling tree generator. As I say, as usual, it's in my quick menu. I wish you could alphabetize the quick menu, but you can't. It sucks. So under geometry, we want to go back to the small pine. Okay, and let's take if we go over to branch splitting now, I will explain all of this. This one's going to be a little bit longer than the others because it's fairly in depth. There's a lot to go through and go over. So sit down with a cup of tea or coffee and let's get cracking. So if we start at the top, we've got levels, which is saying which the trunk is the first level, and then the branches are the second level, and then the third level are these little twiggy bits, and that's normally as high as I go with any tree I build. I have done one, I think, that uses 4 because I just couldn't get what I wanted with 3, but that's extremely rare. Normally 3 is enough, so that's what that means. So level 3, we've now got these bits up as well, and obviously the more levels you put in, the more system hungry sapling will become. So let's look at base splits to start. So if we go to 1 level, which is the trunk, here we have base splits. There's 2 ways to split the trunk. There's using base splits or using segment splits, but we'll start with base splits. So if I increase this value, it's splitting the trunk, and it's got another 4 extra prongs, but they're very contained here. It looks weird. So what I'd need to do is go over to split angle, and then the trunk, so this is the level for the trunk, the first level, I just start to increase that, and you can see it's spreading out quite nicely. So the base splits, as I say, you can control exactly how many times it splits, and it splits quite low down the trunk, and there's not really much of a way to change that, because split height does not relate to this. I can do this and nothing at all changes. That relates to segment splits. So that's the first way to split them, and the other way, and this is completely dependent on the species you're building. Like a maple is likely to have base splits, whereas an oak is likely to not have base splits. So if I was, for example, building an oak tree, well, for a start I'd want a thicker trunk, but that's by the by. I wouldn't want base splits. I'd still want quite a bit of trunk before any splitting happens, because as I say, if you look at the base splits, they split right down here. Whereas with segment splits, which just adds more places for branches to grow from, simply, I believe, number of splits per segment. But as we increase this number, you'll see what happens. So that straight away, just because I've put 0.01 in, even though it's 0.03, that means there's one place for it to split, so it splits that way. And the more we increase this, the more splits up each one of these will get. It might add a third, but we'll see. So I'm going to keep doing this. Nothing's happening until then. So 0.18, so you see it's split a split, and then it's going to keep splitting the splits and split the splits that it's already split. A lot of splitting, as you can see. So you're getting quite you'd be able to get quite a healthy top of the tree. So if it was hemispherical, you'd have a nice shape there. Because with no base splits or no segment splits for the trunk, sometimes you can spread the branches out and you've just got this massive gap here, which is, well, in some species it works, but most it doesn't. Segment splits, I would very rarely go above 0.6. As this one can be real system hungry, especially if you start upping it, the segment splits on your second and your third level. So if I did want lots of segment splits about 0.6, I wouldn't very rarely, if at all, go above 1 on any of these. I would always be under 1, because you can get what you need without that much. All right, so, and while we're here, and we've done segment splits instead of base splits, like I said earlier, base splits are much lower. I wonder, I've never actually done this. Oh, okay, so yeah, you can see how much lower that base split happened, whereas the trunk has split further up. But you can control that somewhat with the split height now. So if I drag this up, at points it just starts to snap. But let me do it with a shift click instead so we can see. You see how that's slowly coming down the tree. So you've got a lot of control of how high up that split starts. As I say, if you were building an oak or something. So that's segment splits. The trunk height, that is easier to show. I'm going to put the base splits back to 0.2. That's easier to show. Well, it's only visible with two levels. So the trunk height says how much of this trunk or what percentage of this trunk cannot have branches. At the moment, this apparently is 0.07 of the trunk without branches. But if I put this up to 0.3, you see the branches. This apparently is 0.3 of the entire length that cannot have branches. So that relates to that. Normally, wrong one. 0.2, 0.3 is pretty good. If I was building a cylindrical shape, I'd probably want 0.1 for the branches to start quite low. But normally I'm around 0.2. But again, depends on the species. Right, split height, split bias. I'm not even going to bother. I never use it. I don't understand it. So skip. Same with this. Split relative to length. It does something. But I don't know. If you want to look into that, you can tell me in the comments, I guess. So let's move on to these bits. So I'm trying to think the best way to explain this. If I was building an oak, for example, I would want fairly healthy looking bunches of leaves, you know, to get kind of little individual domes of leaves, like the English oak that I showed that was in the first video. It's just quite bunchy and it just looks nice. And there are many ways to get that effect, but shall I show? Let me just do that. I don't know why I haven't done that. Let me just append that tree so I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. Bear with me. E, C, D, E, F, E, English oak. There it is. All right, Saga. Okay, so here's the English oak. Eventually. And you'll see what I mean about the leaves. It took me quite some time actually to work this out, and I think there's still improvements to be made. I don't know why that's taking so long. Okay, so you see what I mean about these when it loads there. So you've got these bunches that look nice, like little cotton buds of leaves. So there are several ways to get that effect, and the reason I'm picking that effect is probably because it's the most difficult one for me to get. It took a lot of mucking around to be able to do that with the leaves. So if you can work that out, then it's pretty simple to go backwards for less leaves or more spread out leaves, whatever. Small pine. So if we go back to the small pine, and I want my branch splitting, and oh yeah, okay. Yeah, let's talk about those ways. So you could, to get more leaves, if I just put it up to 3 levels and then turn the leaves on, we'll get to leaves, but I'm just going to turn them on. I forget this is a pine, so the leaves are all wrong. Bear with me. I'm just going to change them back to normal size and not have 500 of them. What I should have said, which we're going to do now, is go back to branch. I'm going back to branch splitting, and I only want 5 of these second level branches. There we go. Okay, so I've got my square leaves, and I just want 20 or 10. Okay. So at the moment, this in no way is going to look like a bunch of leaves. It's not going to look like that hemispherical type shape at the end of the branch. And the ways to make that happen is obviously not to put more leaves on, as you've just seen. If I was to just think, I just need more leaves, I put 50 leaves on, they start to do this. There's not enough segments for them to grow from and not enough splits for the not enough splits. So what we have to do is go back to, we'll leave it at 50. We'll go back to branch splitting and let's discuss the ways. So what I want to do is I need more splits and I need more branches, but I don't want too many because it just fills with branches and twigs. You've got to find a happy medium between 3 settings. For the because we're looking at the 3rd level, that's where I'm going to start and see if I can make bunches there. If not, I'm going to go back to the 2nd level and look at that. So to make the more leaves, but to bunch them out more, to separate them more so they look a bit fluffier, I could just add branches. So if I put 20 of the 3rd level, I have got somewhat of a bunch. But this also depends on the scale of the leaves. But it's not very nice. It's not very natural. It just looks a bit bunchy, a bit too bunchy. So, and also on top of that, I've added a significant amount of branches. It's hard to see unless there was a texture on it. I wish there was a way to put a texture on it while you're working, but hey. So I've added too many branches or too many twigs to do that. So I don't want to do that. So let's say I don't want 10 is a pretty good number I've found. So first of all, I'm going to start either increasing segment splits or curve resolution. And to see what that does and the differences, it's easy to turn off the leaves. So if we look at the 3rd level, branch splitting, and we're now here on the 3rd level, and watch what happens when I increase segment splits. You see it starts to add more of these little additional splits. So extra little branches are being split at the ends. Split ends, and you're getting more places to add leaves, but you're again adding a considerable amount of extra branches and they're quite thick. It doesn't look too unnatural at the moment, but trust me, it can do. So again, I would normally 0.6 is a good number. That's all right, I think. But what I want is I still need more splitting, but at the ends of these now. I think I've got enough of the branches and enough of the twigs, but I need the twigs to split more. So this is where I'll go down to the curve resolution on the 3rd level. At the moment it's 3, and you'll very clearly see what happens when we start stepping this up. It will effectively split. It will split the branch, and then it will split the split it just made, similar to how we looked at earlier for the 2nd level. So see, there's a new split happen there, and then if we keep going up, now it's added another 2 splits there, and then again we keep going up, and you just see it's giving you that kind of webbing effect by splitting and splitting. You can see we're starting to bunch up quite a few branches. Again, depending on the species, that might be what you want, but to me that probably looks too much. I think 8 actually looks all right. Yeah. And if I put the leaves on now, let's have a butcher's. Okay, it's definitely fannier, but I think we can do a little bit more. So I might now go and look at the 2nd level, either segment splits or curve resolution. Segment splits is going to add more branches and more branches, more places to split from the 2nd level, but curve resolution, I believe, on the 2nd level is going to split what's already there. It shouldn't really add more of these lengthy ones. So let's do that. So if I start increasing 5, and again this is where you'll see it will start to get system heavy. But you see how it's just splitting more and more and fanning out more. I think I actually liked 7 there. Yeah. And another way to help the fanning out is to change the split angle. So if we look at the 2nd level, if I just increase that, see it's clearly splitting it, and it's the same process for the ends. So sometimes adding split angle can spread the branches into each other. And again, it makes it look a bit more spread out. There are things I'm going to do to change this because we can't get that exact shape without going into branch growth. It's just not, because we're not discussing branch growth at the moment. But now there's quite a chunk on there, and what that means is because I've added so many more places for it to split, I can now add many more leaves, probably double the leaves, because there are lots of places. And bearing in mind these planes, when they're a leaf texture, they've got an alpha channel, so the leaf is actually probably about this big. So you bear that in mind when you're looking at the scale of these leaves when we get to leaves. So, but I am going to increase to 200 leaves. And you see now, even though I've put the number up to 200, because there are so many more places for the leaves to grow from, that it doesn't look like there's repetition or anything. So I'm kind of getting those branches that I want. Those, I mean, it kind of looks like a loose pole pine. It is a pine, I suppose. And then once I'm happy with that, again, I can't get the exact shape I want because we're not working on growth at the moment. Then I will introduce more branches. So let's take this up to 15 and see if my computer doesn't blow up. Did all right. Could probably get away with 20. As I say, it's in the shape of a pine, so everything's growing. What I can instantly see is there are actually too many leaves. You can see these repetitions. There are ways to fix that, which I will talk about when we go to when we're on the leaves tab. But I would certainly want to reduce that. That looks all right, I guess. Okay. So now let's continue. I'm going to turn off the leaves, get out of render mode, and I'm going to go back to 5 branches so that it's not crazy system hungry. And we're nearly done anyway. So split angle variation, that's pretty obvious. Some will split more than others if you increase that. It's useful for both. Rotate angle. If you're not happy, say for instance the back of the tree seems to have less branches and a bit of a gap, you can just roll that and pick a better angle. That's literally all that does. It's just pick an angle you're happier with. And again, rotate angle variation, that's obvious. Outward attraction, no idea. The words outward attraction make perfect literal sense, but in honesty, I'm not convinced it does much. That's what it does. To me, that just splits them closer. So I can't explain that. So, oh, hang on, no, I can clearly see it there. That's literally the first time I've actually seen how clear that is. Ah, good. I've now explained outward attraction. So that's pretty good, actually. Yeah, so you can see it's just dragging the ends of those branches towards the outside of the tree. That is actually wicked. I'm really chuffed I've worked that out. Branching mode. There's 3 options, but I've never switched from anything from rotate. That's all I've ever got. Okay, that's probably close to 20 minutes. I think splitting, yeah, that's everything. That's everything covered for branch splitting. So to summarize, if you want loads of leaves, get that bunchy effect, like that oak type effect, then you're going to be flitting between branches, segment splits, and curve resolution for whatever level you're working on. And just, as I say, trying to avoid, and again, unless the species calls for it, trying to avoid chucking 70 twiggy branches just to get more leaves. You're going to want to work the segment splits, work it, and the curve resolution. All right, I'm going to leave it there. And then next we will come back and talk about branch growth. All right, I might leave that tree here actually, and then use that in the next episode, next part. All right, have a good one. Bye.